My turn. Pretty crazy, huh?
The world won't end today, but you will.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are throwing it back to a few years ago. We're talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. You know why. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is soon upon us. Our reviews / impressions after 40 hours with the game are out now. If you want to check them out, it was the last video we posted. Link down below. But what we're doing here is a little bit of a recap leading up into Rebirth. And fret not, we're also going to talk about classic Final Fantasy VII in a big 3-video wide celebration of the release of Rebirth, because this is one of my most anticipated games of the year, and I just had to talk about it all. So yes, we're going to spoil a lot of Final Fantasy VII Remake in this video. I'll be sure to let you know when that happens. Let's not delay any further. Before we begin, a quick word from today's sponsor. The following video is brought to you by Squarespace. We live in the day and age of entrepreneurs, all right? So everyone's got their own side hustle, growing business, million-dollar idea that they're looking to pursue, and now you're gonna take the first step to being your own boss. One way you can get your eyes on your brands, your products, your ideas is through a great website, but it's gotta look slick, it's gotta look good, it's gotta look professional, and that's why I'm here to tell you about Squarespace, where all of their websites are powered by Fluid Engine, a next-generation website design system from Squarespace, so it's never been easier for you just to hop on, pick a template, design your own website, whether it's for custom merch where you're trying to sell a product, and you'll just focus on the important stuff to create that passive income stream, while Squarespace will handle things like production, inventory, shipping, all the monotonous business stuff. They got that covered for you. There are analytics to help you track your website's growth, the business's growth. So what are you waiting for? It's time to start your own business. It's time to make your own website. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/retrorebound to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Okay, so thinking back to when Final Fantasy VII Remake was finally announced, I also remember those troll moments from Square Enix. I think of the tech demo for the PS3 with the introduction to Final Fantasy VII, how incredible that looked, and how that was really the kickstart for Final Fantasy VII Remake to be a thing. And then when we all thought it was finally happening, because many people were just asking for Final Fantasy VII Remastered, and so we kind of got that with a port to PS5, which was announced during a big PlayStation conference, and the crowd reaction was perfect. The immense, tangible disappointment. It hurt at the time, but it is so funny to look back on now, because all anybody wanted was just modern Final Fantasy VII. And hilariously enough, even when we finally got that with Final Fantasy VII Remake, it still really wasn't what many people were asking for. I'm not saying that made it worse, but when many people were saying, give us Final Fantasy VII Remake, they said, give us the classic game, touched up, visually more appealing, and just hand us that. But Square Enix, as we'll talk about in the story section, had a lot more ideas in mind. Anyway, I want to start off with the gameplay because, as I mentioned, I wanted to keep things as spoiler-free as possible until we get deep into the thick of the story throughout both Remake and Intermission. So if you're looking for a chance to catch up, I got you covered. Yeah, when it comes to the gameplay, this is, to me, the best evolution of action gameplay we've seen since Free Flow. I feel this is where a lot of the more high-budget JRPGs are going toward. I think a lot of them are scared they're gonna bore people with turn-based combat. I don't feel that energy at all. Like, I think of Octopath Traveler 2, a fantastic turn-based game, like a true traditional turn-based game. But I can't help but look around it. Final Fantasy VII Remake, you look at Kuro no Kiseki, aka Trails Through Daybreak. You look at what's happening with this new Metaphor ReFantazio from Atlas. Like, all of these games are action turn-based hybrids. At some point, they end up more turn-basedy than action. I'd say Final Fantasy VII Remake falls more on the action side of things, but you can see this is where the industry's trending of this hybrid approach. But no doubt, Square Enix broke the ground first with Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it is, in my opinion, the best evolution of action combat we've got since Free Flow. Free Flow excelled because it really put you in the boots of Batman. You could feel each crunch and bone breaking, but it had the style and the power of a hero at the same time as incorporating all of his gadgets and really building a lot off the incredible enemy design. But just the flow, the movement, the feel of Free Flow was incredible. Where Final Fantasy VII Remake gets things extremely right in its gameplay is that it's a clear callback to the originals, right? We don't leave behind the ATB gauges, but how can we bring action combat to the forefront while keeping that turn-based nature a still big part of the game? And they do it wonderfully. As you build up the ATB gauge, you're gonna spend those bars on abilities, on spells, on items, unless you have certain pieces of equipment that allow you to use certain things for free, but it just works marvelously. And so each character has their own little gimmick or play style. You know, Cloud is a big, heavy damage dealer, so he takes time to swing around the Buster Sword, but when he lands, you could feel that connection. When he does his Braver ability, it does heavy damage. Aerith doesn't do a ton of basic damage, but she has really great abilities, like ones that can enhance her basic attack, and she even has a ton of magic abilities at her disposal because her rods typically have a lot of materia slots, so she does a lot of spells, she can target a lot of weaknesses. Tifa, big time brawler, does tons of damage, slips and slides all over the arena, absolutely the most fun to play as. She has this ability, I think it's called Starburst, where she just explodes everywhere. It is such a cool ability, feels so good to pull off. I also love her unbridled strength. As you build that up more and more, you can go into Omni Strike, and then you can go into Rise and Fall. Like, I just really like how they built her kit, where she is easily, in my opinion, the most fun to play as in this game. And then there's Barret, who I'm not too crazy about in Remake, but as I mentioned in my Rebirth impressions, I think they did a good job improving him. But I think it's because this game just too often made you individually play as Barret, and he's definitely, even when he's at his best in Rebirth, I think the least interesting to play as. He's a good sub option to have though. You have these weapons with unique abilities. As you use these abilities more, they unlock permanently, so then you can really tailor your build using the SP system and the skills you unlock per weapon, and then the materia system, where the materia gradually evolves as you use it more, so it's kind of evolve as you play. It's a fantastic skeleton that they somehow managed to evolve upon in Intermission, as we'll talk about, but also in Rebirth just took it another step forward, and I don't know where they take it in the next game, but I don't know how you make this any better. Still, this is one of the best gameplay systems in gaming right now. But what I also love about this game is how linear it is. It is extremely linear. Not Final Fantasy 13 linear, which is not something I hate about that game, might I add. I just want to throw out there again a reminder, I love 13 as a trilogy. But I digress. Extremely linear. Very few times in this game do things open up to more than, you know, a little square room. It's always shoveling you down a hallway. Can remind you a bit of some of the worser parts of Final Fantasy 15, I think, but I enjoy a linear game nowadays. I don't need everything to be open world. I burnt down an open world a lot sooner than I think most people did. Currently, I feel the open world fatigue is really prevalent and people are just yearning for more like 9 to 10 hour games, maybe even 20 hours and more linear focused. I'm there with you all, but I've been there for a while where I feel if you're gonna do an open world right, it has to have purpose, and I think that's something Rebirth does well, as I talk about in my impressions there. So I appreciate that Remake decided to make Midgar more compartmentalized, and you can see different hotspots throughout, from the slums to some of the higher level sectors, Shinra, like you get to see it all, right? It's a bit of a tour, rather than just having the whole world open to your exploration. So I appreciate that it's more linear. I also appreciate the mini games. You have ones like the Honeybee and dancing sequence, which is just a quick time event, but it's also like an interactive cutscene. I thought that was pretty funny. You also have the squats mini game, which is a lot of fun. Throwback to Crisis Core for me. So I enjoy that. I will say the gameplay can be awkwardly paced at times. It's something I brought up about Rebirth as well, where you have like the sewers in Chapter 9, you have the haunted train yard in Chapter 11, which I like that segment. I like the tone, especially in the atmosphere there, and Aerith and Tifa's interactions there are pretty good, but generally the plot slows down a bit during these big dungeon segments. There's also times it slows down by who you're playing as, like Barret in Chapter 13, you play as him individually for a little bit, and that's not, to me, super ideal. It feels like the game slows down a little bit too much, where it turns what is a 35-hour game, it could have been maybe 25 hours, and so I feel at times Remake is a touch too padded, but the gameplay is so fun that I oftentimes don't mind engaging in what may be filler content. And if I were to lay out one other gameplay critique, it would definitely be, I feel, the visuals at times. It's fixed in Intergrade, but I remember reviewing this game on PS4. There's this moment in chapter 15 where you're scaling Midgar up a ladder, and you kind of look out and see in the distance all of the rubble. And yeah, it looks like a PNG. And on PS4, base PS4, it looked rough. So Intergrade helps it out a little bit. But yeah, that was definitely one of those moments where you could feel we were getting to the limit of what the PS4 could do. So yeah, I think the gameplay is excellent even in Remake. It only gets better in Rebirth. But let's talk a bit about the story, because that's really what gets the brain going when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, yeah, it's a fun game to play, but it's that story. So spoiler mode, it's gonna get flipped on now. Just a word of warning. This isn't gonna be a beat for beat, chapter for chapter recap, more like a highlight reel for me of big moments and discussing where the series is going to go. So I'm not gonna go through every single moment of the story. But yeah, when things open up, I mean, this is one of the most iconic openings in gaming. To see it in its glory visually, in its glory in 3D, and the music just absolutely nailing it. This raid on the reactor, it's an incredible start to the game, and it's even better in Remake. Where I think things immediately start to get that charm is interactions, something I was very complimentary of in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and it's fantastic here in Remake. I think of Cloud on the elevator where Barrett's like, "Can't you hear the world crying out in pain?" And Cloud says something along the lines of, "You really think that, huh?" and Barrett's so affirmative. He's like, "Damn right I do." And Cloud just cold, detached, tells the dude to go get some help. I love Cloud's energy in this game. It is so funny because it just never disappears. Like, he's always a little detached from the situation, and that's what makes him special. There's also moments like Cloud dressing as a woman to get into Don Corneo's palace, and just seeing how the party reacts to it, like, "Oh, Cloud, so pretty." Like, I just love those moments of interaction. And my other favorite one is, I think it was Cloud and Biggs, and they were about to jump off a bridge or something like that, and he called him his bro, and Cloud says, like, "I'm not your bro," and they just jump off together. Those types of interactions are so genuinely funny to me. It's really what makes Remake that memorable game, because you grow attached to these characters. And that's where I had my reservations about spending a whole game in Midgar, but because they built out Avalanche way more than I ever expected, it was like, oh, okay, I see the vision here. Like, this makes these characters that were kind of throwaway now really important and enjoyable and endearing. And so yeah, like, Jessie is one of those characters that when she dies, it was one of those things where I went, well, I expected this, but this sucks now, because I really liked her. I wanted more of Jessie. Like, this, man, bring her back. Like, let's have some more interactions. So yeah, like, she really swept a lot of the audience off their feet. I think just generally the way they handled Avalanche, that's a tall task, making them likable, making them enjoyable. When you think about Midgar as a section of base Final Fantasy VII, this was, you know, a 2, 3, maybe 4 hour stretch of the game. The rest of the game beyond Midgar was really the highlight, and to turn that into a full game, it explains some of the dungeon padding for sure, but it also allows these characters to really flex their muscles, and you get some brilliant interactions out of it. Where I think it falters a bit, the side quests, man. Final Fantasy until Rebirth just did not understand side quests. I know, again, some people have defended 16. I'll do a retry of that game at another point in time. I just felt those side quests really authentically wasted my time. But Final Fantasy VII Remake side quests are just so... I have a friend who adores them because he feels when there's moments like the plates of Midgar fall, those people you were helping along the way, you feel that impact now. Like, those people you were helping, all their lives have been disrupted, so it hits a bit harder. And I understand and respect that perspective. It gave me that good angle of, I can see why someone would like this, because there's more time, more interaction, more in this world. I just feel that what Rebirth does with its side quests in those really character-driven moments where, you know, Barrett and his fatherhood is put on display in one particular instance in Rebirth, you don't get enough of that in Remake, where a lot of it's these side quests that just are designed to fill out the game more, distract you more, add hours to the clock. Like, I wish there was more things, say, like the Chadley fights, where you can just spawn in bosses, work together, like more gameplay oriented, more creative approaches. Again, I think Rebirth gets this much better, but when it comes to Remake, it's definitely a sore spot for me when it comes to the game. But let's talk about the big parts of the story here. So there are these whispers which I have interpreted as Square Enix manifested before our eyes, because these whispers pretty much operate as trying to guard certain events occurring in Final Fantasy VII and operating as they should, like protecting destiny, protecting fate, but you continue to fight them off throughout. And so as you get through Final Fantasy VII Remake, particularly by the end, you start to realize this isn't a remake, but more of a sequel, is how I at least interpreted it. By the way, we have to spoil Crisis Core to talk about remakes, so I'm just gonna give you that warning as well in case you haven't played that here. So 3, 2, 1. Zack is alive now. Okay, what? Zack is alive. This was the moment of the game for me, because I love Crisis Core, as many of you know, and it was that moment of like, oh my God, he's there. Like, he didn't die at that final battle. But oh no, he didn't die at the final battle, because the big fear with Final Fantasy VII after Remake dropped was that mixture of, hey, you know what, knowing Zack is back, this is exciting. But also realizing that Square Enix may undo one of the best ever video game deaths, right? Zack dies as a hero, and that is incredible. You know, now you can get some Zack and Cloud interactions, so it's like yin and yang. There's a big risk to keeping Zack alive, but you get so much potentially great out of that. You may have the opportunity to play as Zack in a modern Final Fantasy game. That's an incredible thought that I don't think any of us conjured up when Final Fantasy VII Remake was even an idea in our head. So I respect Square Enix for being so bold. So these whispers are unlocking things like that. Other things like Biggs surviving. Okay, this was not supposed to happen. There are things that I've started to theorize based off that. Like, does Sephiroth know the outcome of, if this is like a sequel, does Sephiroth know the outcome of the original Final Fantasy VII, which is he loses in the end of it all. And so therefore he's trying to steer Cloud and Co. to pretty much open up this new future by destroying the whispers, right? Because you'll see sometimes the whispers interact with Cloud and it's Sephiroth. So I'm wondering if this is his doing somehow. That's like the big question mark with how these whispers function. But also at the same time, I have to say it again, this could be what I like to say is a Nomura moment, right? So you have, according to Final Fantasy VII Remake's Ultimania, the 3 whispers fought at the end of the game are in a style similar to Kadaj, Laz, and Yazoo, who are all from Advent Children. At the same time, you also now have Dirge of Cerberus, which we're going to talk about Intermission in just a moment here, getting mixed in and is more relevant than ever, thanks to now seeing Nero's there. We have mentions of Vice there. We also have Ever Crisis characters, as I said in my review, in Rebirth. And now you're starting to see this all-inclusive approach to Final Fantasy VII as a universe. And it does take a true creative to look at Final Fantasy VII and think, what if we made this all-encompassing universe where all these characters had existed at one time here? And that's a scary thought, because again, you're undoing a lot of greatness there. I don't have a lot of love for Advent Children outside of that final fight where I think it's absolutely sick. Dirge of Cerberus is a great candidate for a Crisis Core level remaster / remake where it's not fully from the ground up, but it's enough there where it's been modernized, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and I feel like if Vincent's gonna be a part of Rebirth, then like, yeah, might be a great idea to brush people up on the characters he interacts with, especially if they're relevant in Intermission. So you're starting to see all these worlds pull together, kind of like Kingdom Hearts. It reminds me a lot of that. So you could feel the Nomura fingerprints all over the project, and all of that is exciting because you get to see all of these characters come together. And naturally that leads to, I have to spoil base Final Fantasy VII here. You have been warned. You have to wonder what they're going to do with Aerith now. Like, is Aerith going to die? If we're starting to keep Zack alive, does Zack watch Aerith die? How does that change things? Does Aerith live and someone else dies? Like, we need to kill Aerith, don't we? Isn't that like a big point in the plot? Like, what happens here? So that is the big question mark. And I know Square Enix had said for a lot of people that they're afraid that they'll guess the ending of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So who knows how it's really going to go quite yet, but this is something that having those whispers included has major implications on the future of this series. And I feel like a lot of it's going to end with them undoing everything. So some characters are going to die again. Some characters are going to live again. They're going to reset the timeline. I could see gamers hating that, but I have to finish Rebirth before I can say I understand where we're going for that final part. But yeah, the story in Remake is insane. And now let's talk about Intermission to cap it all off. So this is another big change here. Yuffie was originally this side character that you would just find in the woods and you could potentially recruit her. She had very little interactions on the main story itself. You could like take her on dates, quote, for example. You could have these fun interactions with her in like side content, but otherwise Yuffie wasn't a big part of the main story. But in Remake and Rebirth, she absolutely is a massive part of that now because she is a mandatory party member. So Intermission was really setting her up for once that ends, you see her riding the chocobo outside of Midgar, you see the group traveling on the road, and then you see Zack kind of rehearsing how he's going to approach Aerith when he finally gets the chance to talk to her, right? So you see all these characters set up in their journey, you're wondering how they're gonna reunite, and I will just say the way that Yuffie joins the party is incredible in Rebirth. I think it's so good. But what I will also say is that originally the side character is now a main character. Does this have positive implications on the story? I think so. Yuffie is so incredibly charming and wholesome and hilarious that immediately frame one of Intermission, I went, yeah, make her a mainstay. This is a great call. I love this all. They also introduced Sonon in here, who, yeah, we all knew he was gonna die. I mean, I guess it would have not been too surprising if they kept him aboard because they're already introducing new characters from like mobile games, for example. Like it wouldn't have been too surprising here, but I think his death was handled well, right? Especially because he's talking about his sister a lot, kind of treats Yuffie like that, protects her at the end. You see him kind of getting reunited with his sister. Like, I think it was handled well enough for a character that we could probably pretty easily guess the fate of. And I think the major part of the story was really seeing Dirge of Cerberus characters reappearing, where you didn't really need context of their stories, but more so just an understanding of these are Dirge of Cerberus characters, like what is going on here? So yeah, the game is off the rails. And I think as a DLC, my biggest complaint was one of the final dungeons was a little confusing to navigate, and it involved like a Scarlet boss fight and a lot of robots at once, and got a little confused. And so I spent probably an extra close to an hour in there than I otherwise would have. This is about a 4 to 5 hour DLC, maybe 6, but I think it's pretty good stuff here. And they also include a couple of new Chadley fights that you can do. So ultimately, you know, revising Rebirth, you see just how broad the vision is here. What started off as many people just asking for Final Fantasy VII Remastered, which that was requested during the era of remasters where it's like, hey guys, we just want to have the base game up-resed pretty much. Maybe some new bells and whistles, that'd be great. To see it go from that to Zack's alive, is Aerith even gonna die? Like these questions are being asked now is insane to me, right? Absolutely insane. So, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for our retro rebound of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this game, where you think things are gonna go in Rebirth and beyond, down below. We'll be back to talk about Final Fantasy VII Classic next time. Otherwise, I will see all of you in the next retro rebound. Peace out.